and welcome to NJ Thrive Small Business Webinars. Today is Thursday, September 19th, and you are attending one of our weekly webinars created to help New Jersey small business owners start, grow, and thrive. I hope everyone is doing well today. Thank you for joining us. We always appreciate your support, your attendance, and your participation. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. And if you have been attending these types of webinars with us, the NJ Thrives Small Business Webinars, thank you so much for your support as well. My name is Uzma. I'm a consultant here at NJSBDC. That stands for America's New Jersey Small Business Development Centers. We are a network and a statewide program powered by the SBA and partners to help small businesses in New Jersey with three main things. And those things are no cost small business consulting, training and events starting at $0, just like this one that you're attending, exclusive small business resources. When we say a statewide program, that means that we have regional sectors all over the state, throughout the state, not located in every single county. Some of our regional centers cover multiple counties, but on the right there, you'll see the map and you'll see that there are small SBDC logos, and that's where our 11 regional centers, including the state office and our satellite office, are located. Go ahead in the chat and let us know where you're from, who you are, what you're doing, how you heard about our webinar today. If you'd like to share anything about your business, make sure you're sending the message to everyone if you'd like everyone to see it, not just hosts and panelists. You can change the option. What your small business is about, feel free to network. So if you want to share anything about your business, your socials, phone number, anything like that, just make sure you're not sharing private things. Moving on with the agenda, we have a couple of headlines that I'd like to share with you. Then we have our presentation and then a Q&A. The headlines are just things that are happening in the community, in the New Jersey small business community, or even nationwide. So we like to share these things so you are in the know. And I will go through them very briefly, and you can click on these links. These links will be shared in the chat. You can click on them, you can save the chat, as well as open the hyperlinks. So this is episode 3 of our Empower to Grow from Olympian to Entrepreneur with Priscilla Loomis. So this is a show that we started recently, I believe in April or in June. So this is something that you can watch. It's an episode on YouTube. This is episode 3. Episode 1 and 2 are also on YouTube and more to come. So feel free to go ahead and watch. Second is about an event that's coming up with one of our partners. So NJ Small Business Summit 2024, which is happening on Thursday, October 24, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, this is happening at Montclair State University, and it is an in-person event. This is the agenda for the event. It will ask you and show you the what's happening, the 2025 AI Trends for Small Businesses, Lunch and Business Expo Tour, doing business with the government, and then fireside chats with entrepreneurs. All right, so if you're interested, then there is a link to register and become a partner as well. And then next is a press release from NJEDA, which stands for New Jersey Economic Development Authority. It is also a great small business resource. If you already are not familiar, we recommend that you familiarize yourself and become accustomed to their press releases and news. So applications for the voucher program phase 3 approved by NJEDA board and expected to open in early 2025. Phase 1 and phase 2 have already been ongoing or have been completed, dedicating additional $10 million to support manufacturers' access to new equipment. To date, NJEDA has committed nearly $50 million to over 325 manufacturers under this program. Informational webinar will be held later this fall. Applications are expected to open early 2025. And there are, I believe, some requirements. So vouchers valued at 30 to 50% of the cost, maximum award is $250K. Priority sectors that will purchase manufacturing equipment, non-targeted manufacturers that will purchase equipment, etc. And there are some more details that you can find here. Just for the interest of time, I won't go over them completely. Last is from America's SBDC, is a press release. Google announces $10 million grant to America's Small Business Development Center for AI training. The new funding is part of Google's goal to skill over 1 million Americans in AI. All right, so this is funding for NJSBDC. And the funding will go to SBDCs and other organizations. That means that you will see curriculums being furnished in the upcoming year and next year for small business owners. So very exciting things happening. Stay tuned. All right, those are our headlines. Things to keep in mind. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. The Q&A boxes should be right next to the chat box. This way, we'll address all your questions at the end of the session. If you'd like to receive the slides from our presenter today, please complete a brief survey and you will receive them. It's a Google form. You just give us your feedback on whether you liked it, you didn't like it, what we could do better. And then this link will be on your screen once you complete it. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel as well. All our webinars go there. Our NJ Thrives webinar specifically go to our YouTube channel. The links have been shared in the chat and will be shared continuously throughout the webinar. All right, enough for me. We have our presenter today for strategies for managing toxic behavior in the workplace. We've had Beverly before. So Beverly Beuermann-King, we've been having Beverly for, I believe, the past 4 years, and we've always had great feedback, and there's always exciting topics to have. So Beverly, thank you so much for doing this again today for us. Welcome, and the stage is yours. I will stop sharing. Go ahead and you share yours.
Wonderful. Thank you for setting me up with that. And it's hard to believe that it has been that long since we've been doing all of these presentations.
Yes, 4 years since I believe the pandemic started.
I know. All right. So we're going to be talking. Now, give me a thumbs up if you can see my slides okay. Everything's good? All right. Just do that double check there. As Uzma said, I do have my chat open, and so I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions as we go through today. There was a lot of interest in this particular presentation around how to deal with the toxicity within our organizations. And so just a little bit about me. Like I said, I've been doing presentations around mental health leadership, resiliency, and difficult people for over 20 years. And right now, I'm actually really seeing a lot more around how do I deal with the difficult people, the negative attitudes, how do I deal with the toxicity within our organization? And so I'm seeing that increasing, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that is, and then what do we do with it. All right. First thing I want you to do, and again, so you have your chat open, make sure it says to everybody, but I want you to describe a behavior or an attitude of somebody that you have to encounter, whether it's a client or a colleague or even a family member, that frustrates you, creates stress, or sucks the life out of you. So give me a behavior, an attitude, something that somebody does that just makes you crazy. So the whiner, the complainer, good. Somebody who's dismissive, who refuses to talk to the peers or colleagues. Wave as smile or wave, dishonesty, smarter than no respect, time waster. Oh my gosh, turns a happy situation out. Colleague who does the reverse of racism, backstabbing, microaggressions, no respect for boundaries. Those came in very, very quickly. People did not have to think about these. Hybrid employee who refuses to attend. Some people talking and don't understand. Supervisor who doesn't like questions. People who sabotage. Oh, I think we could probably just spend the entire day reading these comments and commenting on these comments. There is so much behind this. These are the people that steal our energy. They can suck the life out of us. And so you can keep throwing them in there because people are watching and reading these, and they can certainly relate to these. Let's start with this part. My coping strategies. Even me just reading those changed the way that I felt. It's one of those things. How many of you, when you were thinking about this person or the behaviors, you could feel it in the pit of your stomach, or maybe you got your neck and shoulders and back up? It changes the way that we feel. It changes the way that we communicate. Any of you, come up with the great one-liners 5 hours after the fact? Yeah, because it stays on our mind. It plays on it. I'm seeing in here a terrible migraine headache. Yeah. And so it stays with us. So my coping tip number one is watch how much time and effort you give these people, because it does change who we are, and that changes the way that we feel and we act. And we often give them far too much of our time and energy. Again, we replay the situations. We changes the way that we kind of feel about situations. So how much time and energy, and then how do we deal with them? So what we know is that having to repeatedly deal with difficult people over and over again, it increases our exhaustion, it increases our risk for burnout. Like I said, all of the physical and mental impacts that it has. And so we're going to talk about, what does it mean to act rather than react? I want to think about like a workplace where there's conflict without the negativity, where there's collaboration without the backstabbing. These are the kinds of things that are important. And so for me, it's all about, how do people fit together? And as the leader, how do we address these in a way that we can help get the best out of people? It's kind of like that puzzle that we put together. And so it is about acting rather than reacting. Now, I know as leaders, many of us struggle, and we struggle with the toxicity within our organizations because often we just don't have time to deal with it. I know your buckets are already spilling over with far too much to do and not enough time to do it in. I saw the types of businesses that you were listing and the kinds of things that you do. And there's, as entrepreneurs and small businesses, there is a lot on your plate. It's not necessarily a whole lot of different people that can take on all those tasks. So often the people stuff gets put on the back burner. I think we also get frustrated. Why don't people know how to get along? Why don't they know how to do what it is they're supposed to do? And so we get frustrated often with the people issues. And then when we're dealing with the situations, often we deal with the surface issues, but we don't get to the root cause of what's bringing about this negativity, the difficulty, the frustrations, and the toxicity. So we're going to talk about, how do we address it? All right, so in the chat, again, let me know, what do you think of? What comes to mind when you think of a toxic workplace? Now, some of those behaviors may come to mind, but if there's other things, or if they're the same things, throw it into the chat. Let's see what everybody has to say. What comes to mind when you think of a toxic workplace? Stress, no collaboration, that you don't belong there. Sadness, degradation, frustration, vindictive behaviors, tension, gossip, people not getting along, conflict, financial insecurity. Good. Yeah, there's all of these pieces where there's discrimination and people don't feel valued and people are miserable and unprofessional. Behaving like middle school students and bullying with other coworkers. Yeah. There's lots of images, I think, that come to mind. So I want to talk a little bit, what are some of these signs? Now, many of the things that you threw in the chat are going to be signs of a toxic workplace. I want to highlight a few of these. The first one, some of these are around communication, and it may be different ways of communicating. It may be constant lack of clarity around the way that we communicate, different people getting different messages. It may be passive aggressive communication where we're only getting bits and pieces. It may be where people are weak listening skills. It's the meeting outside of the meeting where people don't speak up in the meetings, but they talk about it afterwards. Or even when they do speak up, I'm seeing in the chat where people don't feel like they're being heard. So there's a lot around the communication issue. The us versus them, and again, I'm seeing some of that in the chat. It could be the the frontline staff versus the administration. It might be the union versus the non-union. This department versus that department. Anything that sets us up as the us versus them mentality. Other contributors to toxicity, it may be leadership, and some of you were mentioning different leadership styles, behaviors that may actually be contributing to that toxicity. So it might be somebody who's narcissistic, might be a micromanager, somebody who's negative, who's blaming, who's finger pointing at everybody else, but not taking the responsibility themselves, where they don't show respect for people's time and energy and contribution, where they play favorites. maybe in the way that they assign tasks, who gets what schedule. And then it may be this kind of lack of support, lack of empathy for the other areas of your life and not understanding the impact that those things can have. Results of some of this stuff. Again, when we talk about signs, I'll often go into workplaces and I'll see where people are unmotivated. They're feeling undervalued, not heard, disrespected. That sense of they're a number and they're almost disposable in some sort of way. Where there's a lack of growth, where they don't feel like they're growing in their organization and in their skills, in their abilities. We'll see high turnover. We'll see high absenteeism. We'll see presenteeism. All of those things that we talk about. People don't want to work there. They don't want to show up. They don't want to be there when it's highly toxic. And then they may not even be the recipient of that, but it ripples out throughout the organization and it makes it a not nice place to work. When there's toxicity within a team, I'll often hear people talking about a lack of balance in their life. And so that means often that they just don't have the energy at the end of the day to take care of themselves, to be with their families, to go out with their friends, because it's sucking the life energy from them. They're burnt out, they're tired out, they're worn out. And so it can be the extreme and experiencing burnout, or it may be just some of the symptoms of burnout, but it's having an impact. The other thing that I notice when I go into organizations, and especially when we talk about conflict and what's been going on lately, people will talk about how things keep coming back over and over again, that it never seems to go away, that it's something that happened 5 years ago keeps coming back into the mix again. And then everything seems to be about drama. There's nothing that's little. It always seems to be this big event when we have conversations or when we're collaborating or when we're trying to figure things out. And then the last one we talk about is everything from gossiping, finger pointing, harassment, bullying, discrimination. And a lot of that came up when we talked about what does that look like. I'm not going to comment. We don't have time for this toxicity. Absolutely. It does suck a lot of energy and time from us. And it creates this environment where we don't want to end up working, and we certainly can't bring our best. So I love this definition. When we look at the word toxic, harsh, malicious, harmful. Yeah, it's just, it brings out such rich and vivid images. The University of Northern British Columbia tried to put a definition around what a toxic workplace is. And it really, what they said was, it is a workplace could be considered toxic if it's ineffective as well as destructive to its employees. It's having an impact on the teams, and it's having an impact on the company bottom line as well. And so we see when we talk about toxic work environments where it can be created colleague to colleague, it could be because of leaders and supervisors, and it might just be the entire organization, the way that it's structured or the way that it pits people against each other. Maybe it's the entire environment. Now, just because something is, actually, I'll come back to that in just a second, and I'll kind of complete that thought. I was looking in here. Vague roles and responsibilities can absolutely lead to that. What do we know? We know that toxic workplaces breed toxic employees, and toxic employees absolutely breed toxic workplaces. So they impact and they infect each other. So let's talk about our agenda. That was just some of the background so that we're all on the same page when it comes to talking about toxicity within our organizations. So we're going to look at what are some of the major challenges that I'm seeing right now? What is the leader's role in dealing with these issues? And then what are some steps that we can take when we have to have one of those really difficult conversations with somebody about their toxic behaviors and attitudes? I do have the Q&A open, and I do have my chat open. So please make sure you ask questions as we go. So let's start with this first part. The first part is about identifying the challenges. We know that dealing with the toxicity, it creates all kinds of, headaches and dread. It sucks out our energy. So it's really important that we figure out what is it that we're going to focus on and what's contributing to the toxicity in the first place. So let's think about this. What are some of the behaviors that people do that create an unhealthy environment? So again, you can throw it into the chat. What are some of the things that people do, the behaviors and attitudes that they have that create this toxicity or negativity within our organization? So what do you think? Belittling, yeah, putting somebody down, jealousy. Yeah, certainly when people are yelling, lots of yelling, not being a team player. Headhunters, that's an interesting one, because that may mean a couple of things. If you wrote headhunters, do you want to give me a little bit more explanation on that one? Bullying, lack of communication, won't accept responsibility for their performance, so they're hostile to other people. Entitlement, absolutely, the blame game, excluding people from meetings and events. You can keep putting those in there because I think we're gonna talk about a couple of these. I like that somebody put entitlement, because entitlement is one of the big issues right now when it comes to creating toxicity. This is what I deserve. I deserve this because of my education, my experience, my title, how long I've been here, my age. There's lots of things where people feel entitled to be treated a certain way. When we have different core values, I mean, I spend a lot of time with organizations right now, and certainly thinking about your own organization. Have you talked about values? Are you hiring people based on their values? Because when our values are out of complete alignment, that's when we're going to see a lot of negativity and toxicity. Are our values in alignment? Doesn't mean that they need to be the same, but are they complementary? Or do they push each other to the point where it's impossible to work together or to make decisions or to figure things out? The us versus them mentality, I talked a little bit about that. It's that high school think that I talked about. Being selfish or self-centered. So thinking about that, it's all about me. What am I going to get from this situation? And not necessarily looking at about how this impacts the organization. People who are passive aggressive. Again, passive aggressive behaviors, and I'm seeing some of them in the chat. It's the acting out, it's the gossiping, it's spreading rumors, spreading misinformation. That would be that passive aggressive types of behavior. Not sharing all of the information that you know about something else. And then the last one, anything around attention seeking, the look at me kinds of behaviors. Again, only concerned about how this impacts me, not necessarily how it impacts everybody else, not showing the initiative, taking the credit for other people's work. And I saw a couple of those in the chat as well. Now, we talk about these types of behaviors. Sometimes they stem from being emotionally immature, gossiping, rumors, forming cliques. And then sometimes these behaviors are occurring and people are pretty much just unaware of the impact of their behaviors on other people. And so it's really important that when we see these types of behaviors or experience these types of behaviors, that we address them, that we recognize them, that we address them, and we address them appropriately. We don't sweep them away, we don't ignore them, but we deal with them in a way that allows them to understand that they're not acceptable in our organization. So we're going to talk about how we do that in a minute. So this part's all about identifying what the challenges are. Now, another challenge that I see right now is that some people are just not the right fit. And we see that happen. Sometimes we promote people because they were really good at the job, but they're not necessarily good at managing the people. So sometimes they're the wrong person in the wrong job. We also know that we are different people than what we were prior to the pandemic. And so maybe we were the right person at the right time prior, but maybe now we're not the right person in the right job. Maybe the job has changed, or maybe we've changed what we put up with, what we tolerate, what we want from the world. So I'm seeing a question. How does one survive and thrive and grow in such organizations, maintaining financial security and job security? What's the solution? Okay, so I'm going to get to some of those. I think that's kind of going to filter out through the entire piece. But it is, first of all, it's recognizing them. And then it's how do we address them? Now, sometimes how we address is different if you are a leader as opposed to colleague to colleague. So today's we're really talking about kind of a leadership responsibility. But I also do a program on dealing with difficult people where it is how do I deal with kind of colleagues, community, family members? How do I deal with certain types of characters within my organization? So thinking about this piece, do we have the right people in the right job right now? Because again, that could be causing some of that difficulty. When people start to feel unmotivated because they're not progressing, they're not given enough responsibility, or the best parts of the job have been taken away, or they're worn out and tired out because they've been doing the role of multiple people. Some of this happens, and part of this, I think, is because we're talking about culture. We look at what has the world been like post-pandemic, and we really have been focused in on workplace culture. What is the employee journey? What is the employee experience? How are we focused in on well-being, health, mental health, issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, flexibility in our jobs? So all of these pieces are part of the employee experience. And we're seeing where maybe we haven't focused enough on the employee experience, or the employee experience hasn't kept up with the changes that are taking place. When the culture is not exactly what we need it to be, it can absolutely be demotivating and people leave. We know that culture is actually way more powerful when it comes to attrition than things such as how much money we make or how much money we throw at it, the management, and even work-life balance. And so when we look at kind of the rank order, it's toxic workplace culture is the number one reason why people leave, next to low salary, poor management, like poor leadership, and a lack of being able to have balance in my life. It's using up far too much of our time and energy. Values. We're talking about challenges right now. And I said I was going to talk a little bit more about values, but values are really, they're more than just having a poster that says our mission, vision, and values. And in some cases, I actually think a lot of companies just kind of reach into a little bucket of values, pick out 5 of them and go, oh, those look pretty good. We'll go with that. A values exercise has to be so much more than that because it is about creating the culture that we want to work in. Our values are our rules of engagement. They're the way that we make decisions. They're when there are no values and no rules of engagement, then how do we make decisions? How do we hold people accountable? It's our values help us to choose between right and wrong and this decision over that decision. It's funny, prior to the pandemic, I saw a lot of people who had as part of their mission, vision, and values, one of them being that our people were the most important, our most important resource. Yet when it came to this really big challenge, we call it, the really big challenge of all of the changes involved with the pandemic, they didn't treat their people as a resource. It was, and so some people, it was not a great situation for them. So our values are really, how do we treat people, if that's one of our values, when push comes to shove? And are we willing to hold up these values no matter what happens? Even if it's our best customer who's pushing against us, are we still willing to hold to these values? So they help us to choose between right and wrong. If you haven't done a values exercise, I would highly suggest, because it's not only about what do we want as a company, but who are our people? And so when we can understand the people in our organization and how things fit, it makes it a lot easier for us to move forward. Our values create the culture. And if we're not purposeful in creating that culture, one's created for us anyways. And so that's why we see a lot of the toxicity. If we are not purposeful about addressing this within our organization, that toxicity grows and it becomes the culture. it grows and it festers, and it, even if we're trying really hard over here, but we're not addressing the toxicity will become part of the culture that we're creating. What we value guides our actions. I think some have aspirational values. Yeah, there can be aspirational. This is what we hope to be when we grow up. That's okay. Because you can say, okay, like if we are aspirational and we want to be this eventually, but we're not quite there, then you can say when we're not living those values, this is where we're missing the mark. Because if we're on this path to be that, then, and we're doing these kinds of things, that's not helping us to get there. So I'm okay if they're operational values or they're aspirational values, but really what they are is our guides and our principles. And if we aren't living up to them, or if we're not moving towards them, then we're probably creating a culture of toxicity. Let's talk a little bit more about culture, because I love this word. The word is civility. Sorry, I got something in my eye. All right. I love this word civility because it's not a word that we use very often. It's probably not even a word that we put as one of our values, but it's such a rich word. And it's more than being polite. It's more than saying our pleases and thank yous and holding the door for somebody when we walk into the building. It's bigger than that. And so when we talk about civility, it's about taking care of other people, and it's about taking care of ourselves. And it encompasses courtesy, the pleases and thank yous. It encompasses respect, but it's also about inclusion. It's about where what's this common ground look like? It is about tolerance for the differences that we have. And as leaders, I think this is the biggest one. It's the belief in the inherited good of the people around us. That people are really, they're trying. They may not be doing it correctly. They may be doing some things that just, are irritating and get on our nerves, but they really are trying. And I have this person on a board that I'm working with. I'm the president of a national board, and I have this one person who just gets under my skin. And I have to always go back to that. They're trying. They're just not doing it right. They really do want the best for the organization, and they're very passionate about it. It's just not collaborative. It's just not respectful. It's just not necessarily appropriate, and they become very myopic. And so we have to, be able to understand that they're trying, because that brings us to a different place of dealing with that person than if we come at it from they're just trying to tick everybody off in the process. It is about sincerity and forgiveness and kindness and honesty. And so looking at all of those pieces, when it comes to the challenges of dealing with that toxicity, is, are we creating the right environment? Are we encouraging the right behaviors? Are we coming at it from that sense of civility? Let's talk about leadership. What do we know? Well, I said this earlier, that for most of you, you have way too much to do and not enough time to do it in, and your bucket is spilling over. And in some cases, we stop paying attention to that person who's being difficult and toxic. We just don't have the bandwidth for it. But really good leaders, those are the ones that get highly sensitive in these kinds of situations. They tune into these situations because they know that those toxic behaviors, they spread throughout the entire team. So it's more than just somebody who's being rude. They recognize that the entire team suffers. And so they have to address this. They realize that they can't just let it fester and fester. Now, really good leaders. First of all, really good leaders don't personalize it. This person's not doing this just to me, just to get under my nerves, just to push my buttons. I have a hard time with that one. I absolutely do personalize it. And so I have to really fight against that thinking that happens. But really great leaders, they don't get stuck in this all or nothing thinking. Do you know what I mean by that? The all or nothing thinking. For me, it's, all or nothing thinking is along these lines. That person will never change. They've been that way for 30 years. They're not going to change. So we get stuck in that all or nothing thinking. Really great leaders change that thinking. And they're going to think along the lines of this. I'm going to do whatever I can to help that person to change. And if they do, great. But if they don't, I'm going to do what I need to do to protect the rest of the team. Really great leaders, they're going to do what they need to do. They're going to make the hard decisions. They're going to help the person if they can. But if that person's unwilling to make the changes, they're going to have to make some tough decisions. They're going to have to move forward. And so how do they protect the rest of the team from that toxicity and taking it away from them bringing their very best selves to the workplace? There is a lot in that first section of identifying the challenges. The second piece. The second piece is about controlling our reactions. Like I said earlier, the difficulty behind this is that they do take the life energy away from us. And so I want you to think about in your body, where in your body do you feel it when somebody has been negative or difficult? How do other people know that you've had to deal with somebody who's been negative or difficult? So what does it look like and what does it feel like? Now, if you've been with me before on any of my presentations, you'll know that this is a typical question for me to ask, but it's important for us to be aware of how does it impact us? So where in your body do you generally feel it? Throw that into the chat. And then how do your friends, your family members, your colleagues know that you've been dealing with this stuff? So what does it look like? What does it feel like? We shut down, neck and shoulders, stomach, facial expressions. Feel it in your entire body. You see it on your face. You feel it in your head. So headaches, tension headaches. You get a strong allergic reaction. Your asthma acts up, draining. You shut down. Necks and shoulders are a big one. There's lots of places where these things kind of hit, right? We become more distant, more withdrawn. It impacts us all over. We call that the emotional contagion. So we're dealing with somebody else's negativity and it has an impact on us. And so that's what happens is that we catch each other's emotions just like we catch a virus. And so we may be functioning just fine. And then all of a sudden we deal with this situation and it becomes part of who we are. And we're continually spreading those attitudes and behaviors to other people. And so it ripples out. Now, we know that our teams, they're not these little wee islands that are kind of protected. They ripple out to each other, to our customers, and then we take it home at the end of the day and it ripples out to our family. We can catch somebody's good mood, but it's harder to overcome somebody's negative and difficult mood. And as leaders, our research shows that your mood, your attitude, your behaviors have a bigger impact than from colleague to colleague. So how you start your day, how you start your meetings, all of that matters. It matters because it impacts the team. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to jump out of bed and go, yeehaw, let's go. But how you start those meetings, whether they're virtual or in person, how you greet people, how you say goodbye to people at the end of the day, those types of things have a big impact on your team. So think about the impact that you're trying to create, the culture that you're trying to create. Are your behaviors, are your moods, are your attitudes, are they helping or are they eroding that culture? I'm going to leave it there. Let's talk about number 3. When it comes to understanding why people are negative and difficult, what helps to prevent all of this stuff? So we're going to talk about how do we address these toxic issues in the first place? So we need to understand, why do some people become more negative, more difficult, and in what circumstances are we more likely to see these things? Well, we know as soon as there's change and a lot of change going on, we're going to see more of this negativity. And that's why I said it's growing at the beginning of the presentation, because we're dealing with all of these layers of unpredictability and unpredictability. Now, it's interesting because we talked about at the beginning of the pandemic, the unpredictability, and we kind of had it in our heads that, okay, well, once this goes over, things are going to go back to normal. And by normal, we meant predictable. But we know that that's not the case. There's continually going to be these changes that are taking place. And some of them are ripple outs from that. Some of it's, because of the economy. Some of it's because of the election. Some of it's because of just the nature of our communities. And it continues to ripple out and ripple out. And so being stressed out, being worn out, being tired out, being burnt out, it has become chronic within our organizations. It's become chronic within our industries. It's become chronic within our communities. So it makes it harder when we're dealing with way too much to do and we don't have all the complete information. It drains our energy. It makes it harder to stay positive. It makes it harder to collaborate, to keep things in perspective. It makes it harder to be part of the team, to bring the best of ourselves forward. So think about your organization. What's the environment in your organization right now? What would that environment convey? Would you say that it is comfortable, peaceful, engaging, productive? Is it inclusive, supportive, respectful? Or is it full of unrealistic demands, lack of control, lack of reward and recognition and appreciation? How would you describe your work environment? It's an interesting question to sit back. Stressful, chaotic, and anxious are some of the words that people are using. So thinking about, are we creating the environment, the culture that we desire? Unorganized, horrible communication. And so that spins out, doesn't it? And it creates maybe something that we're not hoping to create. For me, burnout means lose your fire. You're losing your spark. You're losing your energy. I'm seeing inconsistent and high drama and intolerant. Absolutely. And that creates that sense of burnout. Jennifer Moss, that's MOSS, has identified these as being the top 6 contributors to workplace burnout. So as leaders, one of our mandates is to be able to address these, to recognize them, to be able to deal with them in some sort of way. Right now, are the people in your organization, are they working with unsustainable workloads, way too much to do and not enough time to do it in? Have you had the conversation? What's all involved in your job and how long does it take? Do you feel like you're always behind the 8 ball? Are we always running, trying to get caught up, but we never can? What kind of stress is that creating? So we need to be able to ask some of these questions around, what are the workloads? Maybe the person's doing the job of 2 or 3 people because we're in the midst of hiring. What kind of impact is that having? Maybe they're doing the job of 2 or 3 people because of layoffs, and we've never gotten around to taking anything off the plate. Is that people can do that for a short period of time, but certainly not for a long period of time? What is the ideal level of workload? We know that anybody who in organizations that were working at 90% capacity, those are the ones that really struggled because they had no room for movement. They had no room to deal with the emergencies. So what is the right capacity that you need people working at so they have enough time and energy to be creative, collaborative, to think ahead, to future-proof your organization? If they're all constantly putting out fires, they're working at such a capacity that they have no room to think, you're putting yourself at risk and vulnerability. Do they have control over what they do and how they do it? Are they rewarded for what they do and how they do it? Do they have a group of people around them that they can talk to, vent to, that they can share and collaborate with, where they feel like these are my people and I belong here? Where they don't feel ostracized, where they don't feel like they're the odd person out sitting on the sidelines. Is there fairness in the way that we hire? Is there fairness in the way that tasks are given to other people? And are they the right person in the right job right now? So what does all that look like? It's important that we create these environments that allow people to bring themselves forward. So as leaders, we need to address these sources of burnout within our organizations. I'm going to highlight two of those. One of them was high demand, low control equals high stress. Too much to do, not enough time to do it in, and the lack of control, not being able to figure out, being able to set our own priorities or make our decisions in that kind of way. Anybody working in your organization in that kind of scenario is at risk of high stress. And it's really like the, sorry, I didn't put that across soon enough, but it's really like the I Love Lucy episode where the chocolates are coming down the conveyor belt faster and faster and faster, and you can't keep up. And the stress level just keeps going higher and higher and higher. The other one to address is high effort plus low reward. Now, effort may be physical effort or mental effort, along with not a lot of appreciation for the job that they're doing. Now, we may not be able to change the effort, but we can absolutely change the reward, the appreciation for the job that people are doing. All right, number 4. When we see these situations taking place, how do we quickly and effectively address, coach, and counsel to improve the situation? And I go back to what I said earlier. It's all about acting rather than reacting. Now, I said I do a program called Stop Letting That Difficult Person Ruin Your Day. And in that program, we talk about these 8 characters that many of you will see in your organizations and in your communities. And how do we deal with them? Understanding who are they and why are they acting this way, and what do we do specifically about that type of person. But before we get into that piece, I always have these pieces called the basic assumptions. What are the things that we need to keep in mind when it comes to dealing with people who are negative and difficult? And there's 7 of these basic assumptions. Well, for today's purposes, I want to highlight the very first one because I think it's the most relevant when it comes to your role as a leader. Difficult people use negative and difficult behavior because they're able to get what they want from being that way. We need to understand, what is the reward? What do people get from the, acting the way that they're acting? And as a leader, it's about stop rewarding those negative and difficult behaviors. Some people want to feel in control. So when they feel out of control, they're going to act out. Some people want to be recognized. They look at me, look at me. Some people want attention. Some people just want to avoid conflict because it's all based on fear. Once we understand what is it that people need in those situations, we're in a much better position to be able to move them forward in our conversations from what is it to what are we going to do about it, from problem identification into problem solving. And so we need to be able to move that and understand that and have that insight in order to be able to have these conversations. Fear seems the rotten root. Yeah, fear is part of it. Fear can be part of it, but so is the need for power, the need for control, the need for everybody to like me. There's a few of the things that come under that. What is the payoff piece? All right, let's talk about strategies. I'm going to take a quick drink here. If you have questions, throw them into the chat. Please comment on how self-care tools like meditation and exercise fit into this conversation. Oh, absolutely. Maddie, I'm going to do that one. That's actually the next section after this complete section. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, okay? Any other questions so far? All right. I'm going to go into how do we have one of these conversations? And so you as a leader are in a situation where somebody is creating this toxicity and you need to address this. We don't want to let it fester. We need to be able to address this in an appropriate way. And so I'm going to give you some tools on how to put a conversation together that's going to help you address these negative and difficult behaviors so that they don't become toxic within our organizations. So the very first one is planning ahead of time, which sounds incredibly easy. It's more than just deciding on when are we going to have this conversation and where are we going to have this conversation. Those two things are really important because you need to be able to have the when and the where at a time and place where you're able to keep your composure, where you're not going to have your buttons pushed, where you are relaxed and you're able to breathe and think and problem solve. So the when and where for that is really important. Part of the preparing ahead of time, though, is also about what is the goal? What is the goal of having this particular conversation? Because often what happens is something happens and we go right into the conversation and we get talking in circles and everything gets brought in and we don't achieve exactly what it is we're trying to achieve. So what's the goal of having the conversation? And then what is it that you want? So it's not just the goal, but what is the outcome that you're particularly looking for? What's going to make this situation better? The other thing that I want you to do in the preparing ahead of time is to rehearse the situation over and over again. So you need to understand, how is this person that I'm going to be talking to, how are they likely to respond in this situation? Are they going to get mad? Are they going to blame it on somebody else? Are they going to walk out of the room? Are they going to start crying? What's the behavior that you are likely to see from this person based on all of the information you know about them? And then how are you going to respond when they act that particular way? If they yell, if they scream, if they shout, if they blame, if they become loud and threatening, how are you going to respond? What are the strategies that you're going to use if that's what they do? And so you want to rehearse each of these scenarios so that you're not caught off guard by their behaviors. We also want to make sure that we're not rewarding their negative and difficult behaviors. So sometimes when somebody starts crying, we're like, here's some Kleenexes. Oh my gosh, what's going on? Let's talk about this. And they're, the avoiding and it takes us down this other path. And we never did get around to talking about the original situation. So again, preparing ahead of time. Again, with the rehearsing these situations, it's not about accepting bad behavior. It's not about accepting discrimination, harassment, and violence. But it is about being prepared. Should you be going down some of these paths? Where's the boundary? Where's the line? And making sure that you're clear on that. I'm okay with somebody saying, when they go to vent off and they spew off and they talk about how nobody around here does their job and where did you get your degree, from a bubblegum machine? And, they just kind of spew. That's all right. They're getting rid of some of the emotional energy. But it's not okay for them to say, like, you know what, if you keep going this way, maybe they're going to threaten to hit us. That's not okay. Ever, ever, ever. But them spouting off, that's, that's okay. When people are way up here, they can't think clearly. Sometimes they need to get rid of some of that emotional energy. So you need to know what your line is, what your boundary is, what do your policies say? And especially when it comes to having these conversations, you need to know what the HR policies are, because this is not about circumventing those. It's about working within those, but keeping some of these things in mind. How do you address a leader about his or her leadership style without fear of retaliation? It's a good question. Can I save that one until kind of we go through some of this stuff, because there's probably a bit more in there that I need to add. So mark that one. If I don't come back to that one, let me know. And actually, what would be really good is if you threw it up into the Q&A, and that way I won't lose track of it in the chat feature. What do you do with individuals who shut down or ignore the conversation, which they decide they aren't interested? You need to show them the interesting piece, and I'm going to get to the next step. All right. So step number 2. Some people are saying, I have people who will walk out. Yeah. And so this is where a couple of things need to happen. Really good leaders are, not only do they create these safe places to have the conversation, but they also start by listening rather than talking. Some leaders go full on, both barrels a blazing, saying this is wrong and this is blah blah, and it just kind of becomes this laundry list of all the things that they've ever done wrong, and it feels like the parent and the finger shaking. What I would suggest for this is that a really good leader starts off the conversation by saying, hey, we've had some issues going on. What do you think? Good leaders start by asking questions first. What do you think has been working really well? What do you think has not been working so well? And by asking that question, or those two questions together, it gives the person the opportunity to talk about what's going well and thinking about those things and let some of their defenses down. And also talking about their perspective of what's not going well. Now, they may have a very completely opposite perspective of what's not going well, and that's okay. But you're tapping into their perceptions of why things are the way that they are. And you may actually hear some things that may be in your research, in your background, kind of asking questions in preparation that maybe you didn't hear. Maybe there's some things happening in the background that you weren't aware of. So it makes it much less adversarial, but it also may give you some insights into the person or into the situation that maybe you didn't have before. Here's where you want to ask open-ended questions. This is where you want to check in with them. Do I have this right? It's not about interrupting. It's not about formulating answers. It's not about coming back with a response. It's really about staying in the moment and doing the check-in. And it's also about checking in with the emotion. This seems really frustrating. Would that be right? Like you're frustrated with how this is going? No, I'm not frustrated. I am pissed off. Again, okay, that's a different level, right? And that gives you a little bit more information. You're listening, you're showing empathy. Everything about my body language says that I am present and I'm listening to this. And so you can, sometimes just by doing that, like I said, it lowers the resistance. The other thing with that check-in is it's making sure that you are hearing what that person's saying. Do I have this right? Is there anything more that you would like to add? And I do that in a lot of my conversations. Is there anything else that you think I should know about this? Is there anything else that you would like to add? Is there anything else that's happened that that I don't know about? It's about exploring and asking the questions. Let's see, what am I saying? Shut down is part of rest and digest to heal and recover. Reboot is not a bad thing. Okay. So yeah, so sometimes the shutdown, we're going to talk about that and how we take care of ourselves. Sometimes when we become very emotional. Now, when I get really emotional and I'm really frustrated, sometimes when I'm really angry, I start to cry, which makes me more angry and more frustrated. And it becomes this cycle. I'm still ready to deal with this. I just may be crying at the same time. Other people will use it as a way of avoiding. Sometimes when it gets really intense, you may need to say, okay, like I think we need to step aside for just a little bit, think about this and come back and talk about it more. It doesn't have to be an entire conversation all at once, and kind of a push comes to shove. So depending on the situation, it might be a couple of conversations. It might not be one right after the other. There could be some variations there. Let's go into the third piece of this conversation. The third part is that you need to give some feedback. So you need to, comment on what it is that you've heard. And so what does that look like? And so we talk about, again, for the recording, you can ask Uzma and they will answer that for you. Let's see. So giving some feedback. Here's where you want to check in with your own body language, because by now you've been listening to this person and you may be getting upset. Your body language may be crossed. You may be, biting your tongue. And so they can see all of that. So you need to relax that body language. You need to take away some of those nonverbal messages, and then making some eye contact. But here's where you need to give feedback on what you've heard. First thing is commenting on what you see as contributing to the difficulties that are experiencing. And it may be that you've noticed them getting angry faster, that they are not sharing information in the way that they're supposed to be sharing, whatever the behaviors are. This is also the place where you want to remind them of what the goal of the conversation is. And really, the goal of the conversation, if you really broke it down, it's about creating a positive and productive work environment. In connection with that, you're going to talk about what are the expectations. And I'm going to bring up the next one, which is also about commenting on the behaviors. So these go back and forth, right? So we're going to go through some of these, but what are the expectations? What are the rules of engagement? If you've developed out your rules of engagement, now you can hold people accountable to that. You can say, respect is one of our rules of engagement. And when you cut somebody off in the middle of their presentation and you point out their faults and where their mistakes are before they've had a chance to complete that presentation, that's not respectful. And when you get angry at somebody and you raise your voice or you call them, a certain name, that's not respectful. That's not how we treat each other in this organization. So it's really important that we define what does it look like when we're living our goals, and we define what does it look like when we're not living our goals, because now we can hold people accountable for that. So I go back to this next one, or I go forward to this next one, which is focusing on the behaviors. It's not about saying that this is a bad person, but these are the behaviors and attitudes that are not appropriate in our organization or on our team. Don't make the mistake of thinking that people will recognize, again, that their behaviors are inappropriate. So we need to address that, but also that they may not even know how to correct them because they're not aware of them in the first place. So one of the things that I use as a phrase is I often will do a two-part. Here's where your behaviors are effective, and here's where they're not so effective. And so I give the person the contrast. Here's the things that I like what you're doing. These are the things that are appropriate. These are the things that are adding and making, our team successful. And here's some of the behaviors, the actions, the attitudes that are tearing the team down, that is creating a wedge, that is not allowing us to bring our very best to the organization. And when I give them the contrast, it's easier for them to see, oh, I need to do more of these. There are some good things that I'm doing. Not everything I do is terrible, but these are the things that are really the issue. Because often we just assume that people will know. They'll know that it's a problem. Sometimes they don't know. And so we need to be able to show that for them. Let's see. Last one on this page. It's about problem solving. And we need to be able to take this person from what is it to what are we going to do about it, from problem identification into problem solving. So we've now outlined what the problem is. How are they going to correct this? And so you're going to ask them, okay, so knowing that these behaviors are not acceptable, what else can you do? What else would be appropriate when you're frustrated, when you're angry, when you're upset? How are we going to treat people in the next meeting? How are you going to collaborate with your team members? And so we want to be really clear that we outline that for our people or for this person. The next piece with that is, what do they need from you? What do they need from you in order to correct this situation? Is it training on time management, on assertiveness training, communication training, diversity, equity, business etiquette, cultural sensitivity? Oh my gosh, like you could just keep on going. But what is it that they need in order to be able to correct that situation? Again, don't just think that they're going to know how to do that in the first place. All right. Next one is the follow through. When we talk about the follow through is one of the other areas that I think many leaders skip over. Again, you have your HR policies and procedures, you're going to follow those. But what I would say for this is that you have to document this. Some leaders will have a conversation and then it's that, hey, we've had the conversation, you're going to fix it and we're never going to have this conversation again. It's done, it's over, we're moving forward. But what we know is that the greatest factor in sustaining performance, especially improvements in performance, is the follow through, is the follow up, is the conversations. So what are the behavior changes that are expected? Document it, write it down. Here's what turning this situation around looks like. And the other piece with that is, hey, and if I don't see changes by a certain date, this is what's going to happen next. It's not about threats. It's about being very clear what the process is. And then how are you going to monitor progress? Is it going to be through a one-on-one between the two of you? Is it going to be through colleagues and having conversations with them? Is it going to be on productivity reports? Is it going to be reports back from your customers? How is that going to be monitored? And that should be documented as well so that everybody's on the same page. There's nothing worse than when I hear people saying, well, it's been this way for 10 years. Why has it been allowed to be this way for 10 years? What's going on where's the fault in the process? Has somebody not been held accountable? Has it not been documented? Have people been afraid to take the next steps? Is it because that person is one of the partners and they're the one that's creating all of the negativity? Sometimes that's the case. Are we purposefully creating the culture that we desire? And if we are, then we have to hold people accountable to the behaviors that we need to see. And if their toxicity is growing, then somehow there has been a fault in the process. Does that make sense? Let me know if this outline for this makes sense for you. And also in the chat, let me know which one of these is the hardest piece for you to do or that you've seen in your organization. Is it the preparation? Is it the follow through? Is it the setting the boundaries? What's the hard part of all of this? Let me know in the chat. Let me see. The follow through seems to be coming up quite a bit. Setting those boundaries, focusing in on the behavior, not the person. Good. The actual confrontation, actually getting up the gumption to have the conversation in the first place. Yeah. It takes a lot of time. Yeah, this is not a quick fix. First of all, these have developed over time, so it's going to take some time to fix them too. But that doesn't mean that you allow the behaviors to fester for a long period of time. Consequences if there's no changes. Yeah. It can be hard to set what that looks like. And that's where you would work with your HR department. Maybe some of you are the HR department, but it is about, okay, so what is available to us? Are we saying that they're going to be removed from certain projects? Are they going to be suspended if they don't if they don't bring value and they don't treat people with respect, all the way up to termination? Maybe they are not the right person in the right job right now. All right. Let's see. I want to go on to the next piece. When we talk about intentionality, are you being intentional? Are you hiring with culture in mind? Are you training on that culture? And then are you living those values out loud? And is everybody in the organization, oops, that turned too quickly. And is everybody in the organization, do they know their purpose? They know why they exist. They know that this is where we're going. This is a big one because I find that many people don't hire, fire, and promote based on their values. And that's where people often will fall into difficulty. You can train people on processes, but it's hard when the values are out of complete alignment. Are your decisions that you're making, are they reflecting the values? Are we trying to attract the right people based on our values? So we hold them up to the light. One of the companies that I like, they hold a values conversation every Friday, the end of the week. And they talk about where did we live the values and where did we miss the mark on our values? And it can be big things, it can be little things. And it takes a little bit of practice. It takes creating a safe space where people are going to be okay with saying, I missed the mark. I got frustrated in our meeting yesterday, and I know that took over the meeting. I apologize for that. And so it is about being able to hold people accountable in not necessarily a punitive way. It's more in an education way until it gets to the point where they're not willing to change. All right, what am I seeing here? What do you do if you're wrongly accused of being toxic? Well, I would start by listening. What is it that they're identifying as being the toxic behaviors? And is there any validity in that? Is there any merit in that? And maybe it's because the two of you are butting heads because your values are out of alignment. So that could be one of the reasons. It could be that there are different expectations, but those expectations have never been vocalized. And so you need to have, so what do? You have a conversation. And it's going to be a tough conversation because you have to talk about, okay, so without being defensive, what are some of the things that you would identify as being toxic? And where am I not living up to those behaviors? And what is your feedback on some of this stuff? So it is about listening and having the conversation. There may be issues that have come between you. Maybe there's something that was said that was mistaken, that was misinterpreted. So having an open, honest dialogue on this, where did we hit the mark? Where did we miss the mark? Allows people to understand other people's perceptions, because it is about their perceptions. May not be your intention. Their perception matters more than your intention. And so but you get an opportunity to bring those intentions forward. You tried talking and it went nowhere. So then maybe you need a mediator. You need a third party to come in and talk about, how do we move forward from here? What were some of the behaviors that need to be addressed? What's the intention behind it? What's the emotion behind them? What are we going to do when we deal with each other going forward? So sometimes we can't do it just one-on-one. We need to bring another one. Tried that too, and it was shut down. Okay, so why was it shut down? That would be my question. Why was it shut down? What's happening in the background? And I'm seeing same. Okay. Yeah, so I would say for both of those, you have to talk about the why. Why did it go nowhere? Why was it shut down? What do you think is happening in the background? And then you try again. Now, I'm going to talk about this last piece, just to be kind of aware of our time. And then I'll come back and answer some more questions. Self-care, absolutely critical when it comes to dealing with this toxicity, especially as leaders. It's essential that we take care of ourselves because this takes up an incredible amount of time and energy. It eats away at us. It stays on our mind. And so we need to make sure that we're doing all of the things, that we're eating right, sleeping right, exercising, that we're cutting back on caffeine, that we're getting enough sleep, probably more sleep than what we think we need. What are we doing for fun? What are we doing to give ourselves a different perspective on things? Who are we hanging out to? Or who are we hanging out with? Are they full of negativity and sucking us down, or are they boosting us up and giving us energy? I use a principle, and I like that. One of the questions was things like meditation and exercise. Where do they fit? They are absolutely important because they don't change the situation, but they do give you the energy to be able to buffer yourself against the negativity, as well as to be able to think on your feet and deal with the issue in the first place. I use a principle called the SOS principle, and SOS stands for situation, ourself, and support. Situation, what am I going to do about the thing or things that are causing my stress? And in this case, what am I going to do about the toxicity within our organization? So can I delegate it? Can I problem solve? Can I have a conversation around it? What are we going to do about the situation? The O stands for how do I take care of myself? And it's just like the other leg on this three tribe model, just as important that we're taking care of ourselves. So what am I going to do? How am I going to take care of myself? And then the last one is, who am I going to talk to? Who can support me? Because the last S is support. So who do I talk to? Who do I vent to? Who do I get information from? Who's been there? Who's done that? Who gets along better with that person than I do? Because maybe we can learn from how they treat that person, how they talk to that person. So we need to make sure that we understand that as well. So what am I going to do about it? How do I take care of myself, and who's there to support me? And when I can answer those three questions, I'm in a much better position to be able to deal with that person who's negative, difficult, and toxic. It's like having enough tools in my tool belt to be able to move forward. So what does it mean to act rather than react? Well, the first part is understanding the payoff. Why do people act the way that they're acting? What do they get from being that way? And then how do I move the conversation forward from what is it to what am I going to do about it? From problem identification to problem solving. How are we going to continue to work together? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to share files? What are we going to do when we're in meetings together? It is about moving it forward. It's knowing what kinds of things push your buttons. You know, when somebody's loud and stomp, screaming, shouting, I don't mind that person. I come from a long line of stomp, screaming shouters. That person who is vindictive, that person who's manipulative, that's more the person that I have a hard time with. Are we being purposeful in creating the culture that we desire? Now, this is not just a leadership thing, colleague to colleague. Are my actions and behaviors reinforcing the culture that I want to work in? If I want a culture that's positive, yet I'm negative, I'm difficult, I'm putting up the roadblocks, I'm saying it can't be done or it's been done before, or why even bother, then I'm not creating the culture. I'm actually making the culture more toxic. So sometimes we need to do a check on what are we purposefully doing, and am I contributing to a negative culture in any kind of way? And then when something does occur, are you quickly and effectively address coaching and counseling? Are you quickly dealing with this, or are you letting it fester and become part of the culture? And then finally, are you taking care of yourself? What does that look like? It's all about acting rather than reacting. Now, I'm going to ask you to think about this. And I see one person has their hand up. I see a couple questions in the chat. Sorry, in the Q&A box. If you have questions, throw them into the Q&A box and I will absolutely answer them. How do you speak to the next level? Okay. And it is being recorded. Okay, so I've kind of got my bearings there through the chat. For those of you that need to go, that's okay. But we're going to wrap up with a few more things. So I always end by saying, okay, what is it that you want to start doing? What is it that you want to stop doing? What is it that you want to continue doing? And I add those in there because I think it's important that we go into this with a problem-solving mindset. What is it that I want to continue doing? What is it that I'm really good at doing when it comes to communication and creating a positive environment and dealing with my colleagues and coworkers that's making an environment and creating the culture that I want and that I deserve? So what are the things that you're already doing that are good? What is it that I want to start doing that's going to help me to deal with these conversations or create that culture that I desire? And then what is it that I want to stop doing? What is it that is festering or contributing to this negativity in some sort of way? In the chat, if you could let me know, what is a start, a stop, and continue? What is one thing that you want to implement? What is one thing that you want to stop doing? And what is one thing that you want to continue doing that's creating that culture that's helping to deal with that toxicity? So let me know in the chat. And if you have questions, you can throw that into the Q&A. So let me see. I'm going to start to answer some of these questions. So I'm going to go back to the Q&A. So I'm going to pull that up first. And while you're putting things into the chat, I'm going to deal with this. I have a team member who's been with me for 5 years. They play the victim a lot and guilt my new operations team because he feels like he has been there the longest and has not been given the opportunity. Okay. My reason is that he's not responsible. He is very good at his main role, but lacks in other areas. My fear of losing him because it's caused him to give him attention or baby him. Okay, should I ignore the behavior to protect my team? You should absolutely not ignore the behavior. It is easy to want to not give the reasons as to why this person hasn't been promoted, but that's not doing them any good. So you want to put them on an improvement plan and say, okay, like these are some of the key things that I'm seeing right now that are not a match for this next role. And it might be that they don't like dealing with conflict, or they aren't as empathetic as they need to be, whatever that looks like. Like you said, technically they may be very good, and you want to acknowledge that. These are the things that you do that are really good. These are the things that are maybe not appropriate for this next level. If you would like to move forward, you don't have to. You're really good at your job, and I hope that you are happy with the contribution that you bring. But if you would like to move forward and you think that you deserve a shot at that, then these are the things that I need to see in order to be considered. You need to put it forward. You want them to know that you value the things that you value. You also want them to know that it's not just because you don't like them. It's not just because you like somebody else more or that you're being unfair. You want them to know that there's reasons behind that. That's the only way that you can be fair to them and give them the chance to improve. So hopefully that answered that particular question. How do we achieve our goal of getting more royalty of our employee? I'm not sure I understand that one. How how we achieve our goal to getting more royalty of our employee? You might need to give me a little bit more on that one because I'm not quite sure where to go with that one. Micromanagers drive me crazy. I view them as very counterproductive. Is it a good idea to detach from their way of this behavior? I usually delay the response or activity until I'm in a calmer moment. When they're micromanaging, we tend to either get really annoyed, really frustrated. Maybe we become passive aggressive in their behavior, so we don't give them what they want, which makes them want to micromanage it even more. You need to give them reassurance. I go back to what is the payoff? They're micromanaging because they need to be in control. They feel like if they take their eye off the ball, that things are going to fall apart. And so if we went all the way behind that, it may come down to fear. You have to address some of those fears. So you have the conversation. This is what you need me to do. You need to let them know that this is the goal, this is the outcome. I understand that these are the deliverables, and this is what I'm thinking about how to get there. And so I know that it's hard to let go, but trust me, I will do it. And then be true to your word. If you say you're going to get it done by 4 o'clock, get it done at 3:45 so that they don't have the anxiety build up, so that they don't have that need to be micromanagers. Understand what is the payoff? Why are they acting that way? And how can you meet those needs in a more acceptable way? Let's see. Uzma, do you see if I've...
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. There was a follow-up with the previous question about
Okay.
the royalty or loyalty. So I think Eric has provided a twist on that. Loyalty, I think, fits better.
How do we achieve our goal of getting more loyalty from our employees? Okay. That makes more sense. And I wasn't thinking on my feet for switching the words out. Okay. How do we get more loyalty? We're true to our word. We build up trust. We have a culture that people want to work in. We ask questions. We help them to co-create the culture that we desire. These are all the kinds of things that are part of that. I do a whole program, and we've done it before, Uzma, on the 10 essential needs. What is it that our teams need in order to be engaged? And so that may be another one that we can offer again in the future, but it is respect and appreciation. It's giving them the resources to do the job. It's building up team. It's showing our support for their situation. We go through all of these pieces. When we're consistent and persistent and trustworthy, then we build up that loyalty.
Yep.
All right, let's see. I'm going to go to the bottom and work my way up. Okay, I'm going to come back because I've got some. Let's see. Sometimes our choices are limited as a startup, struggling with financial duress. Take part-time per diem in a position back in the corporate world, and my post-traumatic stress is triggered, and that is making you sick again. Yeah, sometimes we need to be aware that it's not just that somebody's negative and difficult, it's actually having a mental health and physical impact on us. And so we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, that we are aware of what our triggers are. It is hard when we are the organization and the people that we're bringing in. So it's really important that you put a lot of time and effort into bringing the right people into the organization so that you are creating this. And recognizing that when your choices of maybe people or of options are limited, that's where building that team and that sense of having conversation is really, really important. And being as open and honest as you possibly can during those conversations. I see start effective training for leaders. Awesome. Stop micromanaging, dismissing inappropriate behaviors. Excellent. Thank you for saying it was a good presentation. I'm big on self-care and self-support, as many Americans living in relative isolation. Yeah, we need to be connected. This is where another piece that you can do, and I think that's one of the values of the SBDC is when you're stuck, you can come to them and you can work through some of these situations. You have access to these wonderful advisors who have been there before and who've got amazing resources that they can connect you with. So make sure you reach out and you use those resources. Big on role models. The SBDC absolutely can be role models because many of them are running their own businesses as well as advisors. Start to support and educate employees about emotional intelligence. Great. And I would even say EQ and AQ, adaptability quotient. And that's another new thing that's out there as well. How do you help people to be adaptable in the faces of all these changes? Have more conversations about the issues, address specific issues, collaboration, request feedback, regular check-ins. Continue to listen to the complaints and address immediately. Continue to be a good listener, reflective, stop ruminating. Oh my gosh, that's a big one. Replaying the situations over and over again. All right. What am I seeing? I'm seeing some thank yous and some thank yous. Awesome. How can we check responsibility of target to get results of our employees? How can we check? Okay, again, I think I need a little bit more. So if you're on target with your expectations, expectations are negotiated. And so if Uzma and I are working together, we need to talk about what's that collaboration going to look like? Who's responsible for what? When I say, can you get this done right away? What does that look like? What does right away mean? Right. And so that's, for me, right away mean, can you do it within the next 5 minutes? She's going, well, right away means sometime today, right? Or vice versa. So we need to make sure that we're clarifying. Definitely thank you for today. Oh, you are all very, very welcome, and you're very kind for saying thank you in the chat. I'm going to wrap up with just one more quick little thing. There's an evaluation. You can fill that out, or there's one through the SBDC. Both of those are available to you. What I would say is connect with me on LinkedIn, connect on my website. There's lots of articles, and I always post on LinkedIn around mental health, leadership, resiliency. And so we can certainly carry off the conversation further through those. And you can always reach out to me. You have my email address in the handout because you're going to do an evaluation for SBDC, and you'll get the handout. And then if you have questions, you can reach out to me. So with that being said, I'm going to throw it back to you. Whew. We did it, and you can do the wrap up, Uzma.
Thank you so much, Beverly. We always appreciate it. And what you mentioned earlier, the 10 essential steps, and even the other topics that we've covered with you, our attendees, if they want to learn more and get more gems from Beverly, please go to our YouTube channel. You can just even search, Beverly and NJSBDC, and I'm sure a lot of the webinars that we've done with her will pop up. And as always, so much information, so jam-packed, and so many key things to take away. So hopefully our audience took away a lot of things, a lot of notes, hopefully, to work on. All right, I will start sharing my screen once more, and I will just go over something really quickly. Our webpage, our homepage, NJSBDC.com. This is something that we always like to share and recommend and encourage our audience to go to. Please take a minute or two out of your day to explore our website. Just go through the events that are coming up, resources and data. We have our toolkit there. We have our event schedule, blog posts, things like that, podcast, the Empower to Grow show that I showed earlier. And I just want to quickly go over this page over here. This is our YouTube channel. So go to home, events, and the first link, that's the YouTube channel, where you can go over here and you can even search up just Beverly's name, Control F Beverly or something like that, mental health. And we have all of these from the past 2-3 years available on our YouTube channel. Then if you just quickly go to statewide events, we have events in Spanish as well as English, of course. And then based on whether they are in person or online, whether there's a small fee or they're free, If you'd like to speak to a Spanish speaking counselor, please let us know and we'll provide you one. We'll coordinate with one and they will work with you. So we have events up until December, so feel free to register. And let's see, one more thing. Okay, and our next upcoming NJ Thrives webinar is next Thursday, September 26th. NJ Business Launchpad, your guide to business registration. This is if you know someone, a family, or a friend who would like to start a business in New Jersey, recommend this a webinar to them, refer this webinar to them. This is a guide through the essential steps for registering your business with the state of New Jersey. All right, so you can go to our Eventbrite page or the pages that I showed you and register from there. It's pretty easy, just like how you registered for this. And with that, we've helped many, many, many small businesses grow over the past 46 years, providing the services of no-cost small business consulting, training and events, and other resources. Learn more at the page that I showed you. Thank you so much for attending. Take care, and we'll see you at next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Beverly. Bye.